Hello, and welcome to today's Quick Plays video on using SPR. SPR is a powerful concept that was first introduced in the 2+2 book Professional No Limit Hold'em Volume 1 by Matt Flynn, Sonny Mehta, and Ed Miller. In this video you'll learn what SPR is, how it's useful, and ways to choose better lines. SPR is an acronym for stack to pot ratio. We use SPR as a pre-flop and flop metric for how automatically committed we are to a pot. To figure out the SPR, we can use this very simple formula of SPR equals effective stack size divided by pot size. And remember that the effective stack size is the smallest of the stack sizes involved in a hand. So if we take this hand where middle position opens, we 3-bet with aces, middle position calls and we go heads up, we see that middle position has the smallest stack size between the two of us, and thus the effective stack is 55 and the current pot size is 21.5. Using our simple formula, we divide 55 by 2150 and see that our SPR is 2.6. But what does this number really mean to us? The general idea with SPR is that as the SPR gets smaller, you are more automatically committed to the pot. And on the contrary, as the SPR gets larger, you are less automatically committed to the pot. A small SPR is 2 or less, a medium SPR is between 3 and 6, and any SPR larger than that is big. In small SPR pots, we are automatically committed with top pairs, over pairs, big draws, etc. Being committed simply means that when push comes to shove, we'll get our stack in the middle. Whether our opponent shoves, we bet and face a check raise, or we simply bet the flop and turn, we are happy committing our stack. Now it should go without saying that starting stack sizes will influence the SPR a ton. A player with a small starting stack size, say 20 big blinds, is going to wind up in a small SPR pot quite often. If we take an example like this, where the cutoff open raises with the 20 big blind starting stack, even if he just gets one caller and goes heads up, notice that at this point the effective stack size is $17, and with a pot size of 7.5, we actually have a 2.3 SPR. Whereas if they both had 100 big blind starting stacks, then they'd have an effective stack of 97 on the flop, pot size of $7.5, and an SPR of 13, which is significantly larger. Another big influencer is going to be single raised versus 3, 4, and 5 bet pots. The more raises that go in pre-flop, the bigger the pot size will be on the flop, and the smaller the effective stacks will be, inherently lowering the SPR. It's very common if we look at a 3-bet pot for it to be roughly between 4 and 5 SPR, with starting stacks of 100 big blinds, whereas 4-bet pots will be much smaller. And lastly, you need to remember that SPR is a pre-flop and flop metric. We don't recalculate the SPR on the turn or river, so please don't get confused and make that mistake. That being said, we still carry our SPR commitment ideas from preflop and the flop into the turn and river. So if we got to the flop with 2.6 SPR with aces on this Jack 9-4 flop, we know we're committed to the pot given we have an overpair and a small enough SPR. If we bet the flop for 15 and he calls, we keep that same commitment mindset going into the turn, meaning we'll usually bet if he checks, and if he shoves himself, well, we're going to call and feel very comfortable about that. Even when we are automatically committed to a pot, it doesn't mean that we will always win the hand. Sometimes we'll create a small SPR with a monster hand and our opponent will call with a small pair and spike a set to beat us, or call with a suited hand and spike a flush to beat us. The big thing to remember is that in the long run he is making the much larger mistake by getting involved in a small SPR pot with such a hand. He won't hit strong enough, often enough, to justify his call. And while he may be rewarded once in a while, rest assured that your stack off in these small SPR pots is going to be profitable in the long run. Which brings us to a vital point. We want to be very selective with the hands we use to enter small SPR pots. In those small SPR pots we'll be committed, or close to it, and we want to use hands that would be profitable in that environment. Be forward thinking and consider the SPR you will be getting involved in if you do decide to call that 3-bet or 4-bet preflop. In this example, we open 8s out of the gun, face a 3-bet from a smaller stack size player, and if we think ahead, we realize that by calling, we would put ourselves in a small SPR pot. If we call, the pot size would be 19.5 on the flop, the effective stack would be 31, and thus the SPR would be 1.6. This is a very committing SPR, one that is great with hands like aces or kings, but super tough for hands like 8s. Rather than call and put ourselves into what will likely be a very negative EV situation, we likely should 4-bet or fold, all because we thought ahead and considered the SPR before just auto-calling due to our pretty pair. With small to medium pairs, we like much deeper SPR pots, so there's a lot of money left to win when we do flop our sets, and so we aren't automatically committed to a pot with weak single pairs. To make this more visual, let's quickly graph 0 to 10 SPR and understand which hands perform best in each area. In the left area, as we get closer to 0 SPR, we want to use our strongest hands. Hands like aces, kings, queens, and ace-king are standard. Against fishy opponents, we may even loosen this up to include jacks, tens, or ace-queen. As we begin to slide to the far right and get into 8 or more SPR, hands like 6-5 suited and small pairs begin to play much better. These deep SPR pots offer much more post-flop money to be won, which can give these hands the implied odds they need. Notice that the implied odd type hands don't perform well in small SPR pots, because there isn't enough money left in the stacks for us to win big when we do smash the flop. The middle is the toughest area to talk about since it's kind of a gray zone, and with any gray zone in poker there are a lot of it depends kind of situations. The way that I visualize the gray zone is that I want to use the strong hands more often, veer away from implied odd type hands, and tighten and loosen my standards based upon villain. If I'm in a 4 SPR pot with queens, I'm likely to always stack off post-flop with an overpair against a fish. But if the villain were a nit, and I don't think he'd go all in post-flop in a 4 SPR pot without a hand that beats queens, it pushes me away from automatically committing at post-flop. Like anything in poker, think ahead and consider how automatically committed you'd be post-flop, if that's good for your hand, and how tight or wide villain would stack off post-flop in that SPR. Fish don't understand SPR, but good players do. SPR is a powerful concept that helps us gauge how automatically committed we are or aren't to a given pot. As a general rule, we want to enter smaller SPR pots with strong hands, and stay away from smaller SPR pots with smaller pairs, suited connectors, and junky Broadway hands. Remember, this is just a primer on SPR, and there is much more you can do with it, but just knowing how to calculate it and how to enter small SPR pots gives you a leg up on your ignorant opponents. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, good luck and happy grinding.